In this episode, Golden and I discuss Zack Snyder's Justice League. Full speed ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power. The Omega Beam.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 119. I'm your host, Oren Merton. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that HBO Max commissioned Zack Snyder to finally finish his Snyder Cut, his director's cut, of the 2017 movie Justice League, which he had to leave because of a family tragedy. This has been a very anticipated release. It is a long movie, a 4-hour movie, and as we've done with other films, we start out talking without spoilers for those of you who haven't seen it yet. And when we do go into spoilers, we let you know. So let's get to it. I am here with Golden to talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League, as opposed to the not quite Zack Snyder's Justice League from 2017 that he kind of started and then he had to leave, and Joss Whedon ended up doing most of the movie. And if you go back into the Omega Beam history, you'll see that Karen and Chris Spittler and I talked about the original theatrical release of Justice League, and we enjoyed it. It was fun. Looking back, I would consider it sort of like a junk food sampler. Some of it is really good, some of it not so good. As a movie, it was pretty disjointed, but, it certainly had its fist in the air moments, as well as some, massive problems with plot and pacing and CGI and all the rest. But ultimately, it wasn't a meal. So I figure we'll talk.
It was entertaining, but just barely entertaining.
Yeah, it was entertaining to a degree. We enjoyed it at the time, and we never thought about it again. We're going to do what we've been doing with sort of popular movies for a while, is we'll be spoiler free at first. And then when we go into spoilers, we'll let you know. So you can turn it off in case you haven't seen it yet. But considering it's streaming for free on HBO Max, hopefully a lot of you have seen it or can see it pretty easily. I'm not sure where it's streaming in areas without HBO Max, but hopefully it is available. So overall, this is definitely more of a movie. And I don't just say that because it's 4 hours long. This is a single cohesive story. Zack Snyder has a story to tell. And we warmed up for Zack Snyder's Justice League by rewatching Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition.
Which I think is the only version of it I've ever actually seen.
Okay, yeah, I saw it in the theaters. I mean, I was so sort of negative about the movie because it was just clearly so dark. It kind of took my enthusiasm away. I mean, I consider myself a huge DC fan. I love Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, all those characters, but that vision was so unlike sort of the superheroes I grew up with that I waited until it was in the discount theaters.
Well, I don't remember if I saw it in the theater or
Yeah,
not.
I definitely did. And I remember it wasn't something I really cared about. But I did buy the Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition when it came out because one of the big problems with BVS is that it was so disjointed. And I had hoped that the Ultimate Edition would make it much less so. And it was. It was a much more cohesive film where subplots were taken to their conclusion, things tied together more. And for all that BVS was not sort of my vision of the superheroes, it did have some very important and cohesive themes that it was trying to get across.
And then just recently, Implicitly Pretentious released something on it having to do with the fact that the Batman v Superman is a lot about media and fear. And over the last couple of years, that's just been pushed on us so much in reality.
Absolutely.
Be afraid of this, be afraid of that. Do this because of fear. And with that in mind, I think I think we watched Implicitly Pretentious before.
We did, yeah.
And I think having that in mind, watching Batman v Superman again, really gave another perspective to that and how much power the media does have, especially in this day and age.
It does. And I think, as you were implying, when we went back and rewatched it, it was a better movie than I remember it being. And maybe it's not that the movie was so much that I didn't give it a fair shake at the time, but that knowing some of the more important themes of it, it seemed like it had more to say than when the first time I saw it, I was just, oh, this isn't my Superman. This isn't my Batman. Whereas I could go to it fresh all these years later and say, oh, right, Zack Snyder had a point. And it may not have been the point that I would have made if I were making a superhero movie, but I get it, and I think it was worth saying. So with that in mind, we saw Zack Snyder's Justice League, and this is not a Marvel movie. This is not a nice, tight, light action adventure movie. This is a 4-hour sort of epic for what it is.
Part of it was because you really wanted to go into each of the characters and give them their due.
Exactly. And that was one of the big problems with the first one, is that sort of characters are introduced very haphazardly, and they were trying to shove, the theatrical release was trying to shove 4 hours of movie into 2 hours, and it failed. This one gives you all 4 hours, and you get a better sense of all the characters.
You have a lot more about Ray Fisher,
right?
His character Cyborg.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more background for Ezra Miller's Flash, Barry Allen. It's a lot more detail, and for that reason, it is a little bit slower as well.
Right.
This is not a fast-paced movie.
Right. Yeah, he divides it into 6 chapters where, literally the screen goes black and you get a title, for this particular part. So it is divided up if you want to take breaks, and he's, very nicely gives you moments where you can stop and pick up again. Because this is, in that sense, I would say Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League, is a very comic booky movie, in that it's almost set up like chapters of a graphic novel.
It's a mini series that you're going to watch the entire time at once.
Yeah, thing at once. That's a great way to put it. And
had they dropped just one chapter at a time over 6 weeks, I don't think people would be as happy. But if they had done it like one a night for a week,
sure,
I think that definitely would have been a compromise.
Yeah.
So you're not given the entire 4 hours at once.
Right. Yeah, there are ways that they could have done it and it would have been fine. I think the way they did it now is fine because it is set up for, it's a little bit like sort of dropping a whole series at once because you accept it's all just in one, container. But either way, I think that it works. It works for this kind of story, especially because the parts are all of different lengths. Some are 30 minutes, some are more like an hour. And I think it works really well. And if you like these characters, so I have to say again, if you're really invested in these characters, like, I'm been reading Superman comics, Batman comics for decades. And I really enjoyed Zack Snyder's Justice League, profoundly so, but they're not my characters. And it's not a perfect film. These are not the versions of Superman that I grew up with, the versions of Batman that I grew up with. He was telling his own story. But I think he wanted to do kind of a rumination on responsibility, on stepping up, on, things he wanted to talk about with these larger than life, kind of mythological beings. And as far as that goes, I think it's a great version of it. I know that in interviews he said that this is basically a cul-de-sac, that while initially they were thinking this was going to be the big DCEU that would go on like the Marvel universe, I think instead this is just the end of a trilogy, that he wanted to tell a story. He started with one of my favorite films, Man of Steel, and it went to Batman v Superman, and it ends with Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I think it's a complete story.
But they did leave it way open.
Oh, yeah. It could have gone on.
Left it way open.
Certainly. You know, one of the things about having a 4-hour movie is that you can introduce a lot of characters without running into the problem that everyone only gets 5 seconds. But they do that with a few characters. There's more than one DC figure that has numerous scenes that, had they gone on, you would have been able to say, oh, okay, we got to know them a bit in the previous films.
Basically, if you enjoyed the first Justice League movie, but you want to see more and you wanted to see more developed and just a better movie, this is it.
Sure. I can also tell you, I mean, I have a pretty...
And now for spoilers.
I'm going to stay spoiler-free for one more comment, and that is, if one of your problems with the original movie was that it was too quippy, that it kind of read like a you know, a Buffy episode, in that characters were being really snarky and this and that and everything else, that is not Zack Snyder's style. That is not the style of Chris. I think his last name is pronounced Torito. I'm probably getting Terito, Terrio.
Torito?
Yeah, something like that. I apologize if I got it wrong. You know, this guy is Academy Award-winning writer. I mean, it's much more ponderous. I mean, the dialogue.
Oh, Terrio.
There you go. Thank you. The dialogue is much more heavy. It's much more, you know, Zack Snyder made a very dark and serious movie. Though not nearly as dark as BVS. So if you thought BVS was too dark, don't worry. There is hope in this. But it is a much more serious level of dialogue. It's not sort of throwaway, you know, for the gag of the scene type dialogue. So, okay, are we ready to go full spoiler?
Sure.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Full spoilers. So yeah, I really enjoyed how the characters that in, say, BVS, you know, Batman just comes off as an absolute bastard. Just a fearful, like we were talking about.
Yeah, he's stuck in fear.
Yeah, just a completely fearful bastard. But at the end of it, he's like, okay, I realize my mistake, and now I want to do the right thing. I want to get these heroes together. I want to give hope to the world. And I think the character of Batman is much more fleshed out this time. But moreover, I think that Ben Affleck did a better job this time.
It's a better version of Batman.
Yeah, it's a better version of Batman, and he leans into it. And I think that Ray Fisher does such a great Victor Stone / Cyborg that, you know, for those who've been following the media, you know that he's had a lot of problems with how Joss Whedon handled the reshoots and the way that he felt the studio treated him and things. And I think a lot of it may be the fact that he had an incredibly rich character arc in this movie.
Which was kind of fleshed in the other version.
But yeah, it was just all gone. I mean, he was in action scenes he needed to be in and one other scene.
He was much more integral in this one.
Yes. Zack Snyder has said he's the heart of the movie, and I get that. I get that. He really is. And I'm in the first one. I was a little bit like, sort of, okay, well, he's just sort of this wooden character who shows up. I mean, whatever. I guess they needed, you know, him to be there because he's in the Justice League. But seeing this movie, Zack Snyder's Justice League, I realized no, he was a very important part.
Yeah, and the relationship
story
between him and his father was much more apparent, and it also, I think, meant more to the movie.
Yeah.
I think that really helps the movie be more solid.
I think it does too. I think I was actually very surprised that scenes that were kept, the dialogue was still completely redone and reshot. So, I mean, some of it was obvious. Like there was a scene where, you know, Arthur Curry Aquaman is talking to Batman in some remote Icelandic town, and then he just swims away. Well, it was pretty obvious where they changed the dialogue, because in Zack Snyder's Justice League, he's clearly walking out into whatever he's walking out into. And then in the 2017 Justice League, it was so obviously a green screen. It was almost funny. But yeah, Joss Whedon kept changing just these little things that I think the movie was better with just little lines that were in Zack Snyder's Justice League. A major one was in the Justice League that was released in 2017. There was a scene where all the heroes are standing around the mother box, and the debate is over should they or shouldn't they try and revive Superman. And half of them, but actually almost all of them, say no. Bruce Wayne says yes. And it becomes this little fist fight between Wonder Woman and Batman, where she sort of shoves him around because he antagonizes her, saying, well, you do it for Steve or whatever. And it was just this like sort of almost petty squabble. And yet the actual scene as filmed by Zack Snyder was much better. They were talking about what are the repercussions with Steppenwolf.
Yeah, no one wants to do it, but they see it as the only option.
Yeah, it made more sense. They were much more a united group of people. Even Arthur Curry, who was against the idea, it was for legitimate reasons, and they took him seriously. I mean, it was a good conversation between equals. And so there were just so many of these little changes that Zack made.
In the Joss Whedon version, the Flash going in to save people, he's like, well, I don't know what to do. And Batman has to tell him, just save one.
Right. That's the one line I liked from Joss Whedon's thing. That's the one thing I liked.
It made it seem like in that version that he's not capable.
Right. That's true.
And in this version, that doesn't exist.
Right. He is capable. I mean, he's
just like, okay, I want to join the team.
Right.
Like, I may not have much experience, but I'll figure it out.
Right. And he's clearly nervous in this one, but at the same time, he steps up. And that was cool to see. I agree. It was cool to see Ezra Miller's Barry Allen just say, okay, well, I have abilities. I'm going to use them. I think everybody had a lot of hero moments. And part of that is just Zack's style. Like I had said in the spoiler-free part, he is such a visual filmmaker. There's a lot of slow-mo. There's a lot of CG in this one, and it's very CGI heavy, as you might.
Well, if you're talking about like slow motion, the entire scene with Barry Allen walks into a pet store to get a job.
Right.
And this accident takes place on the outside. And watching from his perspective, I mean, the entire thing is probably a few seconds.
Right.
And yet it's a few minutes in the movie because you're seeing it through his eyes.
Right. And it's done really well. And as I said to you when we were watching it, almost every moment has like a comic book splash page moment to it, where there's like a double page spread of this beautiful painted image. And Zack Snyder is incredibly good at that. He's good at framing great comic book moments.
Just him going up to Iris, who's frozen in time there, from his perspective, and just like moving her hair out of the way.
Right.
And just taking her in.
Right. He so gently lays her on the ground out of harm's way.
But
it's so sweet.
But even before that, he appreciates her before even doing that. And you can tell that there's this attraction to her.
Right.
And then I'm thinking, well, how is he going to hide the fact that, is he going to go back in? Is he going to just grab his resume so the lady doesn't remember him? And then he's just surrounded by dogs to hide the fact that he has no shoes on.
Right. He burned off his shoes going super speed. Speaking of super speed, I think that also the super speed looked better in Zack Snyder's Justice League than it did in the original. The way the lightning was always around. I mean, it made it much clearer this time that he's going into the Speed Force, and even says some of the dialogue is like, I go into this thing where I'm warping space and time. And it made it clearer that that's what he's doing. And it was done well. It was done very well. So visually, Zack Snyder's Justice League is absolutely stunning. I
still love the confronting Superman, and he's starting to run, and Superman just turns his eye and then turns his head to look at him.
Yeah. That was fantastic. That was one of the things.
My only issue with that is that Wonder Woman is fast as well.
Yeah.
And that doesn't translate into that scene.
Well, it could be that she's just so focused on Kal-El that she just wasn't looking for Barry.
She shouldn't be frozen in the scene then.
Got you right.
If everyone else is frozen, she should still be moving.
Yeah.
At least a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, maybe he just didn't want to take away from Zack. And
the other thing that I know, watching the movie, we both commented on, and you would keep turning to me. It was like, do you hear that? That's the Superman theme.
Yeah.
Do you hear that? That's the Wonder Woman theme, really slow. And I think, wasn't the original Superman theme also in there?
Absolutely. And, that's another thing I just want to say is that as a lover of soundtracks, one of my favorite soundtrack composers is Tom Holkenborg, who is more commonly known by his electronica stage name of Junkie XL. He's worked with Hans Zimmer a lot. He did the soundtrack for BVS with Hans Zimmer, and he was hired alone as a solo composer to do the soundtrack for Justice League. But as soon as Joss Whedon came on, he fired him. He took him off the movie and brought on Danny Elfman, which, I'm a fan of Danny Elfman, but for Justice League, I think he came up with his maybe least inspired soundtrack ever. It just, it was not great at all. And when Zack got back on, his version of Justice League, he rehired Tom Holkenborg, and he did 4 hours of new music for Zack Snyder's Justice League, and it is phenomenal. It's the kind of soundtrack that not only did it take the movie to other heights, as Golden was pointing out, but I just got it to listen to as music because it's just fantastic. So it's sort of, not only did Zack Snyder get a second chance to revisit the film, but so did Tom, and neither wasted it. It was, it's a wonderful collaboration and a great melding of music with visuals. I thought it really elevated a great visual experience with a great sonic experience as well. This, like I said, this isn't a perfect movie. As far as things that I feel are maybe not necessary, one of the things I didn't like particularly in BVS was Bruce Wayne's dream sequence where he sort of sees Darkseid's, wasted planet Earth. And in the epilogue, once again, we get a wasted Earth Bruce Wayne dream, which, it was showing some of his emotional damage, and it was showing what he's afraid of. And we got to see Jared Leto as the Joker, and this time he was better than in Suicide Squad, which was fun. It wasn't necessary. I mean, it would have been nice, I think, if the movie was maybe 15 minutes shorter and we did without that dream. But overall, I would have to say this hit all the buttons. We got to see Superman in his black Superman suit, which is a lot of fun. I dig the black suit. I mean, I like the traditional blue and red suit as well, but I think the black suit looked really good. And, ultimately, these are visual movies. one of the issues I had with the Justice League that was released in 2017 and is the same here is Zack Snyder decided that a lot of the Amazons would apparently be taking their style cues from Return of the Jedi and wearing metal bikinis, which I never think is a particularly smart thing to put a warrior in. I thought, one of the big problems I had in 2017 was that Steppenwolf, the CG, looked terrible. Well, they completely redid it for this movie, and it was really good.
Back up for a second, okay?
Sure.
They bury Steppenwolf in the thing at Themyscira.
Right.
As if that's going to do anything.
Yeah.
You're burying him, and okay, you're collapsing the sea. So you're killing a whole bunch of Amazons to bury him, who are sacrificing their lives, but to only buy like a few seconds or a minute or so. I mean, the parademons have wings.
I'm thinking
maybe they think they can't swim. I'm not sure.
I think I got the impression because they were trying, the Queen Hippolyta is telling them to ride with the mother box. I got the feeling that their point was she was trying to buy enough time for them to hide the mother box somewhere new.
No, they just had to keep. They had to keep moving.
Yeah. I
mean, they can only keep moving around Themyscira.
Yeah, it's an island. You can only go so far.
I mean, so I had an issue with that. I had an issue with. I mean, we found out that the reason that before when the mother box was used with Cyborg, that the reason that they weren't it didn't awaken really or send out its message was because Superman was still alive.
Right, they were afraid of him.
And so his cry, his death is what sends out the waking.
Right.
Which I thought they did a really great job on.
I thought they did a great job with it.
I also had questions as to, okay, well, if you have this big flashback as to this war with these mother boxes and the unity and all of that, and it's stopping, and you see the design put down at that time, the anti-life.
Uh-huh.
Wouldn't he remember what planet it's on? And I don't know why that's lost.
Yeah, that wasn't explained particularly well, that somehow Darkseid had lost the information that the anti-life equation was, on the grounds of planet Earth.
It is a cohesive story.
Huh?
It's just not a very deep story.
Comic books are not often the deepest of things, and this is a very comic booky plot.
So I feel like Wonder Woman was layered.
Yes.
This one was just kind of laid out.
Right, it was on the surface.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was like, this is the story. And now we're going to use these characters to tell it.
Even in some ways, Batman v Superman was deeper.
Right. Yeah, I think he relied on a very kind of classic trope of Darkseid coming to Earth to take it over and enslave everybody. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely not as sort of philosophical, maybe, as some of the other movies.
So I know we've had this disagreement talking about comic book movies. Aquaman, I think, is very real. I don't really feel like it is a comic book movie, but it's not comic booky. And so I like Mera in Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like her costume and her over-the-top red hair in Aquaman. It just takes me out of the movie for Aquaman because it's just over the top.
Sure.
That and that one scene where it looks like she doesn't have any legs.
Yeah.
But I really loved her armor, the costuming, and how she's portrayed in this movie more than I like her in Aquaman.
Yeah, I have a problem with neither. I will say that I find it amusing that Zack Snyder decided that she should have a British accent, whereas in Aquaman, she doesn't, which, that was just a little inconsistency that I found interesting. And I think, and I could be wrong because I have not gone back to the 2017 theatrical release of Justice League, and honestly, I'm not going to. But I don't think she had a British accent in that one. In that one, I think Joss may have, done all the dialogue and had her just in an American accent, which is interesting because I wonder if the Zack Snyder version had been the one we saw in 2017, if when they went to do the Aquaman movie, for consistency, they would have had her put on a British accent. However, since...
Well, I don't remember her hair being abnormally red in the 2017 version.
I think it might have been colorized to be redder in the 2017 Justice League.
Now I might have to just go look at the 2017 Justice League just for those scenes.
Just for that scene, yeah. I could be wrong on that, but I think they did colorize it. Although speaking of changes that Zack made that I or not changes, his original version. So in Zack Snyder's Justice League, before the combat with Steppenwolf, where Aquaman meets Mera, he has a discussion with Willem Dafoe's character, whose name I'm currently forgetting. I want to call him Volo, but I don't think that's the name of the character. Volko, thank you. Where Volko is basically saying, come back, take up your mother's trident. Mm-hmm. And he says, no, I don't want to do that. I don't care about the Atlanteans. And so Volko just throws down the trident on the ground next to him before he leaves. So when he fights Steppenwolf and loses and decides he's going to join the fight, we understand how he got the trident. It was left on the floor for him, and he just picked it up and grabbed it. Well, because Joss Whedon cut out that conversation when we first see the trident and everything else, and all we get in Joss Whedon's is he rewrote the scene with Mera, and he says, well, if I'm going to do this, I need one thing from you. And then later we see him with the trident fighting with the guys. And so we're just supposed to assume when he says, I need the one thing from you, he's asking her for the trident. And I liked it much better in Zack Snyder's way because, number one, we get to know it's his mother's trident. Number two, we get to see where it is. And number three, when he shows up with it, it makes more sense.
See, I know that you also had an issue with the air bubbles.
Right.
But I don't have an issue with the air bubbles because I see it this way. If they're talking to each other underwater, they'd be able to understand each other, but we wouldn't.
Yeah.
So the air bubbles are for us to be able to understand what they're saying.
Yeah. There's also another reason I like the way Zack did it, that one of the things we've talked about is during Justice League, he never introduces himself to Mera formally, and she never introduces herself to him. So in Aquaman, she introduces herself, and they finally learn each other's names. Well, the way that Zack did it, that's fine. Their conversation is not that long, and it's relatively antagonistic. But in Joss's version, it's not that it's much more jovial, but it's like he asks her for a favor. Generally, when you ask somebody for a favor, at some point in that conversation, you're going to ask, who are you? Mm-hmm. You tend not to ask somebody for something without ever learning their name or giving them yours. So it just made more sense this way, that they would sort of meet each other, but then not be formally introduced until Aquaman. So I think that worked better the way it was done. I thought the scenes of Superman coming back to life, not knowing who he was, and being about to kill Batman before Lois wanders on the scene and stops him, was handled a lot better than the very ham-fisted way that Joss Whedon did it, saying, oh, well, I'm going to bring the big gun, and the big gun is bringing Lois Lane. It just seemed, like I said, that just seemed particularly, it was all about throwing in a quip. Superman flies up with him and asks, do you bleed? I just remember that one line that you said to me, and I'm all pissed off about it. But again, that seemed not just heavy-handed dialogue, but also if he remembered that much, he probably would have had a better clue of who he was and that he shouldn't be attacking these people. Whereas in Zack Snyder's one, he didn't know anything until Lois shows up and he suddenly remembered love.
At first, he doesn't attack them.
Right, right.
Because
he's not that kind of guy.
But yet, the mother box.
Right.
Remember, when they're reviving him,
right.
The ship says, I get this from the mother box that there's this antagonism.
Right.
And even, I feel like, and we'd have to go back and watch it. I don't think that Cyborg actually says go to Barry.
Right.
He says no.
Right.
And Barry hears go.
Yep.
And he goes.
He does, yeah.
Because Cyborg is understanding that there's this animosity that's being transferred over. And I think that when they're doing that standoff and you have Superman, the mother box within Cyborg sees him as an enemy. So it's starting to get ready to fight him because Cyborg doesn't completely have control of himself.
Yeah.
And that's what sets it off that, okay, we must be enemies.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And I think it just plays much better in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Another thing I thought that played much better in both versions, when Cyborg in the climax is trying to, log into the mother box and save the world, Steppenwolf is going to kick his ass when Superman shows up. So there was this incredibly ham-fisted line in the original where Superman flies up and says something to the effect of, I believe in something and I believe in justice. And it's like, oh my God, really? Did you feel like you just had to throw in truth, justice, and the American way because they said it in the old days? And it was not a fist in the air moment. It was like, huh? He wouldn't say that. It just really rang hollow. In this one, Superman shows up in his black suit, standing in front of Cyborg. So when Steppenwolf swings his axe, it hits him instead. And Superman just looks at him with his big axe just resting on his shoulder with this smirk on his face and just says, not impressed. And it may not have been Shakespearean dialogue, but it made sense that this is an all-powerful being who is just looking at this guy who's been threatening his whole planet. And he's like, yeah, you're done now.
The other thing that's missing from the Zack Snyder is you have to have the Flash and Superman race at the end.
Yeah, that's right. And in so many comics, there is a Flash and Superman race. Joss filmed an mid-credit scene of the Superman and Flash race, which was fun. It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was a nice little addition. That was the kind of happy-go-lucky, quippy superhero jib-jabbering that I think Joss does really well. And I think that was a fun mid-credits scene, but it didn't fit the movie at all. But that was great. And yeah, there is nothing like that in Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is very heavy and ponderous the whole time.
Zack put it as the mid-credit scene?
Did I say that by mistake? Yes. Joss put it as a mid-credit scene. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that if you like these characters and you wanted to see what Zack Snyder's original vision was, you're going to enjoy this. Now, if you absolutely hated Zack Snyder's versions of Batman and Superman, this isn't really going to change your mind.
So I think Mara looks in both versions the same.
Okay.
It's really weird. I'm looking at the pictures on IMDb, and for the most part, all of the scenes except for one, which I think is more of a publicity one. She looks exactly the same.
In both movies?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we haven't talked on, speaking about spoilers, is that Clark's mom comes to have a conversation with Lois.
Yes.
Because she feels that Lois needs to get back out there and live her life. But it's not Clark's mother.
Yeah, Clark's mother leaves the room and it turns into General Swanwick, and you realize, oh my God, General Swanwick all this time has been the Martian Manhunter. And then at the very end, he shows up again to say, hey, you guys really inspired me, and I'm willing to help you guys as who I really am. And I thought that was wonderful, the way that they just sort of weaved General Swanwick in both movies, and and by both movies, I mean Man of Steel and BVS. So I liked how he was woven in the whole time, and the payoff is that, yes, this is Martian Manhunter. They also introduced Ryan Choi, who is the second version of the Atom, the first being Ray Palmer, and the second that Gail Simone created. And I loved how they introduced him. If this had gone on, clearly the Justice League would have had more people in it. We've, been introduced to a couple more, et cetera, et cetera. As such, they're just fun DC Easter eggs because it's not going on. I love the character of Martian Manhunter. Is one of my favorite DC characters, so I got a real kick.
I'm looking at some of the reviews on IMDb, and people are saying, restore the Snyderverse. I got goosebumps. It leaves you asking for more, and actually, it does. After seeing the 2017 Justice League, I was like, oh, okay,
good thing it's over.
Yeah, but I would love to see more of what happens with this group of heroes.
Right. Yeah, after 2017's Justice League, DC decided, you know what? Let's give individual directors an opportunity to make standalone movies. And they had a run of great ones. They had, Wonder Woman came before Justice League, but that was a spectacular standalone movie. You had Aquaman as a great standalone. You had Shazam as a great standalone. Joker was obviously completely out of time, but it was also great. I really, really liked Birds of Prey, and I think it's too bad that because of the pandemic, it literally came out just as China was closing down theaters, and it wasn't in theaters long around the world before they were all shut down. But it's too bad that it didn't get its due because it was really well done, really well reviewed, absolutely worth seeing, and they made some wonderful standalones. But I do think that Zack Snyder's Justice League did show that there was life in this group. I've heard rumors that Henry Cavill has been retained to be in future DC movies. I don't know if that means giving him a Superman movie. It may not. It may mean just him showing up in Black Adam or Shazam or some of the other movies for team-ups and things, which that can work incredibly well. Going to the Marvel side, the Hulk has never had a standalone movie since his first one, and yet he's been a major, major figure in the MCU and fantastic in the movies he's been in. So if they decide that Henry Cavill's Superman is best suited for, co-starring in smaller roles in other movies, that is not a bad thing. But I would love to see more team-ups and things like that. I hope they're not done.
Well, this is interesting. So I'm just, like I said, looking on IMDb.
Uh-huh.
So in the 2017 Justice League theatrical version, Ezra Miller was billed 5th in the credits and Fisher was billed 7th. In Zack Snyder's, those are reversed. Yeah. There are still some really nice one-liners.
Yeah.
But you don't need those one-liners to drive the movie.
Right. And
you use those one-liners as icing.
Right, and to show character. The one-liners in Zack Snyder's Justice League are not designed to sort of throw a laugh in a movie that isn't a very, humor-filled movie. It's designed to show character, to show just interaction between characters, as opposed to Joss, who and to be fair, Joss is not a bad writer. He's written things I've enjoyed quite a bit. He was probably given the marching orders, make it funny, make it light. And so he tried, and what resulted was, trying to graft a smile onto an incredibly dark movie, and it just made it very disjointed. Some of it was very enjoyable, but it was still not a cohesive movie. It was a junk food sampler.
I'm looking at some of the trivia. In order to keep full creative control and ensure that fans receive the most benefit from the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder refused to be paid for finishing his Justice League. This is from IMDb. I'm giving credit where credit is due.
Yeah, I'd read that in a bunch of interviews too, that he wanted more creative control, and the way to do that was to not cost them anything, so they had no hold over him.
So there are new visual effects.
Oh, many more. Yeah.
In terms of filming, new shots or added scenes with actors, there's only about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. The Joker part is all new, because I know he brought Jared Leto in for the reshoots,
and I guess he makes a cameo in the coffee shop that Lois Lane visits early in the film.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I thought it was a really sweet touch too, that the reason he left the original is because, family tragedy with his daughter Autumn. And so he ended this film with For Autumn as the dedication, which I thought was very sweet.
No, it's definitely, this one I would actually be interested to watch again to see if what else I might not have picked up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are definitely scenes, especially when we're talking about the slow motion. I think the slow motion scenes that both make sense and are also just really memorable are those with the Flash.
Yeah.
I still love the Batarang being thrown and him just watching it, assessing it,
right?
Assessing Bruce Wayne, then picking it up out of the air, asking if he's, Batman.
Right.
Can I keep this?
Yeah, you can watch him. You can watch his eyes as he realizes, oh my God, you're Batman. It's a lot of fun.
And that, according to trivia, this is the original version.
Yeah, well, this is the original version. This is the full director's version.
So, no, I wasn't very awed at the Whedon Justice League.
No, it was definitely not awe-inspiring.
But this one is definitely, even as I have some issues with some of the things in it.
Yeah.
But it still makes me want to see more of the Snyderverse.
Yeah. This wasn't a perfect movie, but it definitely showed that there was life there, that it was absolutely worth seeing. And it's a powerful, art film about superheroes. And it would have been interesting to see where it went. But, it's probably not. DC is going off in its own way now, but I'm glad it's there. I'm glad that this was finished, and I'm glad it's there.
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/119. If you liked this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Those reviews help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. The Omega Beam. Full stop.